Welcome to Teachers Talk Money, where a millennial high school teacher and a Gen X elementary teacher get together to talk all things money.
From salary scales to saving, investing, and self-care, we're here to help teachers master their money. I'm Christy.
And I'm Rachel, and we're so glad you're here. Hey listeners, welcome back to Teachers Talk Money. We are so glad you're here today, and I'm so excited for today's episode because I am going to be interviewing Meriam Seboka from Melannial Money, one of my favorite accounts to follow on Instagram. She is a finance-focused teacher, and we're going to talk all about budgeting for debt freedom and building wealth while paying off debt and staying motivated during your financial journey and money values and money mindsets and all of these awesome things. So I am so excited. Meriam, could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself and your financial journey and why you decided to start the Melannial Money platform?
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name is Meriam, as Rachel mentioned, of Melannial Money. And I started my platform really initially just to hold myself accountable as I was paying off $40,000 of debt, which was comprised of student loans, credit cards, and my car loan. And again, it was just for me, right? I was posting my goals, I was posting my budgets, I was posting my debt payoff progress. And now it's become a platform to educate other women and millennial women and men, really anybody, honestly, about budgeting and paying off debt and building wealth at the same time.
I love that so much. And I can totally relate because I did the same thing. My first blog was just like, there was like creative writing on there. It was really just for me. And it totally emerged into something else. Like As soon as you see people respond and say like, there is a need for this, like, I need the information that you have. It really just explodes. It becomes something so much bigger.
Exactly.
So first, I kind of want to talk a little bit about your upbringing because I personally love to talk about people's upbringing and all of like the money scripts that they got from their family and their cultures and their surroundings. And you had a very unique, in my opinion, unique upbringing. You're Ethiopian. Your parents are from Ethiopia, and you were born and raised in Germany until you moved to the U.S. in elementary school. And I know you've lived in some other countries as well. So I wanted to ask, what are some of the money values and attitudes that benefited you the most and you really have like kept into adulthood from that very international upbringing and being a first generation immigrant and all of those things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I moved to the US when I was 9 from Germany, but like you mentioned, my parents are Ethiopian. So it's a lot of different things. It's really strange because I feel like the Ethiopian culture is very flashy. I don't want to say flashy in a sense, but we do a lot of like things that like basically like show off to other people like our wealth really. So for example, and then like moving to America, you're expected to just like make it, right? Like you are leaving your home country and you're, chasing the American dream. So some things like having like these huge like 3-day weddings and these other things basically just to like show people like, hey, like I got this, right? But it's a little bit different for me because I saw my mom like struggling. Like we came to this country and my mom has a high school like diploma. That's like her highest level of education. So she came here and she was working at like Target and Macy's and just working like these lower income jobs, right? So I mean, from her, I basically learned that I needed to go to college. Like, that's what she taught me, right? She was like, if you want like more income, if you want to, change your situation, like you need to go to school, right? And she didn't know anything about the college, like, or university system in the US at all. Honestly, she didn't know anything about SATs or FAFSA or anything like that. It was just like, hey, I brought you to this country so that you are going to provide a better life for yourself and like, her and our family essentially. So that's what I learned from her really, right? It was like, you need to work hard to get where you need to go because she wasn't the best with money, but she also didn't have a lot of money to be the best with, if that makes sense. Yep. Like, I mean, she worked her butt off because she worked like 2-3 jobs at a time, 16 hours a day to provide for us. But at the same time, still living paycheck to paycheck. So what I learned from her was like, no, like you can't live like this, right? You need to go out there, get a salaried good job, quote unquote, right? And then like you won't live paycheck to paycheck. But in reality, we know that that's not necessarily true. Like you could have a high salary and still live paycheck to paycheck. So yeah, that's really what I learned the most from my mom is just like work ethic and making sure that you are educated so you can get a higher salary job so that you don't live in like, low income. Yeah, so I don't necessarily know if that's like a cultural thing. I think that's just like her personally.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really love that too. It really reminds me a lot of my mom too at times, being that single income earner and just also realizing that like just because you work your butt off doesn't mean you're going to have like this American dream idea of success, right?
Exactly,
like hard work. We like to think that hard work translates directly to money, but that is like not the case. Exactly. So that's a really, really good sort of like thing to see firsthand as well, unfortunately. And are there any money values or beliefs that you learned from your mother or anyone else, your surroundings growing up, culture, different cultures from living internationally that you feel like you want to leave behind or you decided to leave behind because they weren't serving your goals and values?
Yeah, definitely. So what I mentioned, the whole like just Ethiopian culture, which I love my culture, right? But a lot of times, like I've been to some weddings that are like 500, 600 people, like, just like these grandiose, like huge weddings. And I really like now as an adult, I'm like, you really have these weddings to basically like, it's for other people, right? It's not really for yourself. So I've come to really learn that like, I'm going to do what I want with my money and not really to like please other people, right? Like even my mom, she's like, when I tell her like, I'm probably not going to have like a huge wedding, she was like, but you have to, like, you have to invite so-and-so. And I'm just like, so-and-so who I haven't seen since I was like 5? No, like, no, that's not happening. Right. So those are some things I'm definitely leaving behind. The whole, just like being flashy, just to like show other people your wealth, which I think is like, what is the point of that? Right. And then the other thing from my mom that I learned, like I'm unlearning because I used to be like this too. Anytime I got any type of money, I basically just spent it because she was the same way. Like she would get her tax refunds or whatever sum of money and she would spend, not save, right? And I would do the same thing. But my sister was the complete opposite. So I don't know where she got that from. So those are two of the things that I'm definitely leaving behind is, just living for myself. And like, I don't necessarily ever want to be in a situation where I'm doing something because it's what I'm supposed to do culturally and it's like a financial burden. Like it's just, for me, doesn't make sense. So
I love that you said that. Those things are really the hardest to let go of, despite the fact that like, and same for me, like I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast yet, but I am not planning on having a wedding and I might not even get married. Like I'm pretty open to just not doing that. And people don't get it. And I don't even have that added cultural element that you do of weddings being this like huge, big multi-day event, right? But even so, like, I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of my family and friends too, right? So, but it's so true. Like these things that we just assume that we need or that we assume we even want when like I don't.
Like, right. I really am like, the type of I hate attention. I think a wedding would honestly be like my worst nightmare. Like everybody just looking at me like, are you serious? Like, oh my God.
It's not for me either.
Exactly.
And it's just like, we just need to look at these things and say like, is this really what I want? Is this really serving me? Is this really for me? Because it's a huge financial obligation to do for somebody else. I mean, essentially, if you're spending, I don't even know how much people spend money. It's 20, 40K. Like if you're spending that much for somebody else,
right?
Like, I mean, if you choose really intentionally that you want to spend that money, I'll never tell you not to. But I think so many people do it because we just believe everything we've ever been told and we just accept that, oh yeah, I want that too, right? But maybe you don't. So it's good to think about those things. That's awesome.
For sure.
My next question is about high schoolers. So you teach personal finance in high school, which I think is amazing. That's actually my dream. And I'm trying to start the class at my school right now. And they're like, what the heck? You're an English teacher. What are you talking about?
That would be amazing. No, they should definitely.
I'm trying to. I'm trying my best. My question for you is, what is the most common misconception that your high schoolers have when it comes to personal finance?
I definitely, you know what, this year has been really interesting because the whole GameStop, situation. So there's a lot of misconception around that, So investing is definitely a huge one. First of all, investing is for rich people or it's not accessible to anyone. And I teach them about investing or like investing in like, low cost index funds or even custodial accounts, right? I was telling them about custodial accounts, like your parents can open one of these up for you like today if you wanted to and put money into one of those. So that's a huge one because there's so much hype, especially with like, stock talk and like,
yep.
And that's where they hang out, right? They're on TikTok. So if they see that on TikTok, they're like, oh, I can just get rich really fast by doing this. And I'm just like, no, like it's the long game. If you play it smart, you can, I always tell them, every single one of you can be a millionaire. Like I'm not even playing, right? Like you can legit be a millionaire. And that they're all like, what? Like, what do you mean I can be a millionaire? And I'm like, no, seriously, like look at this, right? And that's when I show them like the historical trend of like the market, right? The S&P 500. And like we crunch the numbers. If you invest, I think it's like $200 a month, starting at 20, you'll be a millionaire by the time you're 65, right? So then I'm like, okay, what if you did 300 or 400 or 500, right? Like you could be a millionaire so much sooner. And a lot of times, I mean, even for me, I didn't know that when I was in high school. And
heck no.
Right? Exactly. So they're like, what? So, I mean, that's been some of my like most fun conversations. I've had kids like message me on the side, like, how do I do this custodial account thing? How do I get my parents to like start investing for me? And that's been really like just so cool, right? Because I'm like, okay, these kids are starting to build wealth, right? And then on the flip side, debt, right? Just the normalization of debt, which I mean, even for me, like I was in debt. I mean, I'm still in debt, and student loans is a big one for them because it's just inevitable for a lot of people, So we talk a lot about just how you can reduce your student loan debt amounts. And they just aren't really aware of like the amount of scholarships that are out there. So we do like our school has like a database of scholarships that I don't know if it's like not advertised or something, but like we talk about it in class and they're like, what? This exists, right? So that's like a huge thing too, because like now their eyes are open to like, okay, this is how I can first, number one, when I go into the world, I can minimize the amount of debt that I have or hopefully not have any debt. But again, because of the cost of higher education in this country, probably inevitable. But that, and then like coupling that with starting investing early, it's like, they're like, whoa, you know what I mean? It's like, wait, like I can be a completely like different like person than what I thought I could be, right? Financially at least, right? So I think those are two like big things that we talk about that I definitely think are like eye-opening to them and like could like change the trajectory of their financial wealth, right? I mean, financial health, honestly. So yeah, I love that. I love talking about investing and I love talking about financing higher education, really, just in general. That's like my favorite with them for sure.
That is so awesome. You are going to have such a real impact on their lives forever. I think that's so amazing. And I'm jealous. I'm trying to do what you're doing.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I feel like your state should be like coming into like requiring that. Cause I've heard like certain schools and counties are starting, to, but it's hard. It's definitely hard. It's hard to get it approved,
Would you say that there are misconceptions about like the GameStop stuff and just investing in general? To me, it seems from the outside, what I've heard kids talking about and interested about, it seems like they think that investing is just buying and selling individual stocks. Is that the main misconception?
Yeah, that's the main misconception, right? But that's a lot of adults too, right? When you talk to a lot of so it's like, how would the kids know different if the adults don't know any different either, right? And that's like that's the main biggest misconception. It's like you need to put money into individual stocks, and we talk about that too. I'm like, listen, before you invest in an individual stock, number one, you need to understand that anything could happen. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and
Yep.
you should be willing to part with that money, basically. Like, if it's, just make sure you're okay with losing that amount of money. And we talk about like looking into the company and like doing your research. Like, don't just invest in an individual stock because somebody texted you and was like, hey, do this now. Like, it's just, yeah, no.
Right. And because it's on the news and that's what our parents know about.
Exactly.
I mean, that was my misconception because that's all my parents knew about.
Yeah,
so totally
exactly.
true.
Yep.
So let's get into talking about debt payoff, because this is sort of something that you focus on with a lot of your content and also part of your journey right now. What advice would you give to somebody who's just getting started with creating a budget and their main goal in mind, their primary goal is debt payoff?
For me, I would say you need to give yourself grace. First of all, this is like a brand new thing for you, right? Budgeting, to me, I believe, is very essential, but it's also difficult when you're just starting out and you're not going to get it right on your first, maybe even second, third budget. I don't know. It could take a couple months for you to like really understand your spending and really develop a budget that's going to work for you, right? So just number one is give yourself grace. Number two, I would say, is build a realistic budget. And what I mean by that is don't build or create a restrictive budget, because what's going to happen is you're going to continuously go over budget or blow your budget. And then you're going to think that budgeting doesn't work. Like, this is budgeting is not for me. Budgeting is, I can't do it, right? In reality, you can do it. It's just that the budget that you are creating is just too restrictive that it's not realistic, right? So you have to build a realistic budget. And what do I mean by that? Like, if you know you spend $400 a month on groceries, don't make your budget $300. Like, it's because you're going to keep going over budget and you're going to be like, what is going on here, right? Also, budget for fun, right? Things that you enjoy to do, I would say definitely budget for those as well. I'm not saying like go all out, go crazy, but like, if you love getting your eyebrows threaded is something that you have to do every single month, like, do that, right? If you need to get your hair done, obviously don't like go crazy, but I'm saying like things that are gonna keep you motivated along your journey, I believe, are very important to budget for, right? So for me, that's travel. I also have like a random, just like $100 miscellaneous category for like self-care or whatever I want to do that month. Like, and I think that's very important because, again, it's ideally you're building a budget or you're building these financial habits that you're going to carry through, like, even beyond your debt payoff journey. Like, so it should be realistic for just long-term, like, joy and happiness and sustainability. Yes. So that's what I would say to someone creating a budget on their debt payoff journey, for sure.
I love that so much. We need more people in the space like you who are not trying to shame people or just focus on everything that we can cut back on. Because what is the point of money if not to make your life better and to help you reach your goals?
And I am down with cutting back things that don't serve you, right? So if you go through your subscriptions and you cut back on different areas that you're like, okay, I can cut back on this, I'll be fine. But I don't think you should cut back on everything, because that's, again, it's just not realistic, because you're going to be miserable and that's just not fun. Like, who wants to live that way, right? So
yeah, that's awesome advice. And in terms of your debt payoff personally, do you use the avalanche method, the snowball method, the lasso method, or some combination? What do you do for that?
Yeah, so honestly, what I did, I guess it's the debt avalanche method, because I was like, listen, I did the math and I was like, I'm not doing the debt snowball, right? And I understand doing the debt snowball, I definitely do, but I just focused on like the high interest rate debt first, right? So I had student loans, they were federal. What I did was I refinanced my student loans. I don't recommend doing that during this time that we are in, because of there's just no point, because they're currently on hold, right? There's a freeze. But the time that I did them, it just served me. The interest rate was greatly reduced. Then the second thing that I also did was I transferred my credit cards. I balance transferred them. What that means is you take them from one credit card and you can open a new one, or you can balance transfer them to an existing credit card that you may already have. They may have an offer to balance transfer. And what that means is they're offering you like an introductory period of maybe 12 to 15 months of 0% APR. And it's very beneficial because you're not getting charged any interest. But if you don't pay it off within 12 to 15 months or whatever that period is, then you're going to get hit with interest, right? So only if you can do it within that period of time, like you sit down and you figure out if it's feasible for you, there is a small fee, 3 to 5%, but that fee for me was worth it because the interest would have been a lot more than that. So those are two things that I did. And then I sat down, I calculated how much I would have to pay towards those credit cards to have them paid off within the balance transfer period. And then anything else that was extra, I basically put towards my student loan. So now I've paid off all my credit cards. My car loan was paid off like last year, and I only have like I think it's like $7,500 of student loans left, and they are private, so I do have to continue to make payments during this time. So I think I did. I would consider it to be debt avalanche, but I also did like two other different things that like a lot of people don't really talk about: balance transfers and refinancing my student loans.
Yeah, that's a really awesome, like holistic kind of way to look at it. I love that. And hopefully by the time this episode comes out, you'll probably be debt free.
Yeah,
You got a couple of months.
Knock on wood. Right.
Yeah, so congratulations on everything that you've done so far and in advance for when you get to that point. And for a lot of teachers, paying off debt is this multi-year process like it is for you. I followed a really rigorous program where that was like the primary goal when I was just learning about these things. And I honestly, it wasn't probably the best decision. Everything worked out. I have no regrets, but mine was more of a sprint than a marathon. But your debt payoff process and many teachers is more of a marathon than a sprint. So what advice do you have for teachers for staying motivated for the long term when you're working your way through this debt?
So for me, staying motivated has always come down to just identifying my why and like staying focused on that. So I'm like a huge believer in like creating vision boards and just like, journaling and writing down stuff. So my why is basically to like be able to be financially free, right? And in the future, be able to travel whenever I want to, be able to like have a family, give back to my mom and all of that stuff. So on days when it gets difficult for me, I try to focus on that. But that's not to say that I don't have days where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to order a pizza or I'm going to order takeout or I'm tired. I don't feel like cooking. And I feel like that's okay. And that's something that I've already mentioned with the giving yourself grace, right? It's not going to be perfect every single day, but as long as you just continue to go on this journey, I think that's the most important thing. I'm always saying like progress over perfection but it's very cliche, but it's so true because it's just about progressing and about learning and just like, changing your habits and working towards that goal. And it's not going to be perfect every single day, right? Especially because like you mentioned, for teachers, we don't really make that much money. So this may be a longer journey for us, right? But I think just remembering like why you're doing this is very helpful to me. And also creating goals. Like I talked about vision boards, but also like setting goals and like maybe like posting those goals like somewhere where you can see them. Maybe like it's a post-it note like on your computer, on your desk, or on your mirror, whatever the case may be. Like that also like helps for me because I'm like, okay, like this is why I'm currently like doing this, right? Like so I can in the future do these other amazing things that I want to do whenever I want to do because I have the financial means to do so.
I love that. And I also want to talk about building wealth because you are investing while paying off debt. And there's a lot of financial advice out there that says that you shouldn't do that, right? That you should really focus on getting out of that debt first, regardless of interest rate, regardless of anything, just to kind of like, I guess, focus on one goal at a time. But you take a more balanced approach. Christy and I now support a much more balanced approach than that. So can you speak a little bit to why investing while paying off debt is important in your perspective?
I think it's so important because time in the market is like compound interest, right? Is a thing. So the longer that you are invested, the more time you have for your interest to basically gain interest and grow over time, right? I understand where some people are coming from with like, eliminating debt and then investing, right? But then what is debt, right? Because some people are like, a mortgage is not considered debt. Some people are like, a mortgage is debt. Like, are you going to wait until you pay off your entire mortgage before you invest? That could take so long, right? And I I honestly, at the moment, right? I mean, as a teacher, we have our pension. So that's like 5%, I think, of my salary. And then I have an additional 4% that I invest in like the 457B. And so that's 9% of my salary that I'm investing, because that's like 5% is required. And then 4% is like my match, like they match like a certain amount of money up to 4%. So I told myself like that's going to be the minimum that I invest while I'm paying off debt, right? So that's already 9% of my salary. Because for me, I feel like, one, I'm leaving money on the table because my employer is telling me that if I contribute this amount of money, then they will match it up to a certain amount of amount. And it's like, why would I not take that, right? Because what I'm contributing plus what they're contributing is now being invested, and that's going to grow over this entire time that I'm paying off debt. And when I look at my paycheck, it's probably not even going to be that big of a hit, right? And I just think it's really important, because when you're just paying off debt, yeah, it's great to be debt free, but you're gonna start at zero. Like now you're debt free, and then what, right? Your net worth is literally nothing. You don't have any assets. You may have assets, but you don't have any financial worth. And to me, net worth is freedom, right? Because your net worth, the amount of money that you have invested or the amount of money that you're worth directly correlates to when you can retire, or when you can, maybe take time off from work, or whatever the case may be. So why wouldn't you want to start that earlier, right? And the math just makes sense to me, right? Depending on what kind of debt you have, you just want to do the math, right? If you have high interest debt like credit cards, maybe you do want to focus on that, but I think you should still at least be investing in your employer-sponsored retirement plan, because you're leaving money on the table and that you can never get back. Like you're like, well, now that you're debt free, you can't be like, okay, now I'm going to contribute double. Can I get double the contributions? Like that's not how it works, right? So I think it's very important, because I want to be financially free, and I feel like you can do both. You can pay off debt and you can invest at the same time. So
yeah, I think a lot of times we vilify debt so much. Like there's a lot of shame around it, even for like student loans and things that are really necessary for pretty like almost everybody, right? And so when we really vilify that, we have a lot of shame around it. It can feel more emotionally satisfying to get out of that. But if you look at the entire financial picture, that is like one
part of it,
data point. That is one piece of the pie of a much, much bigger pie, right?
Exactly.
And you're also giving up all the compound interest that you would have gotten from investing even earlier.
Exactly.
So especially if you're in this for a multi-year time frame, giving up on those investment contributions and that compound interest is like way more of a toll than like your debt in many cases, depending on those interest rate.
Exactly. And that you bring up such a good point. It really is like a shame and guilt thing, right? It's like, okay, now I have acknowledged I have this debt and I need to sprint to get it paid off, because once I'm debt free, it's like no more shame or guilt. But it's like you said, like there's so much more. There's a bigger picture, right? It's not just debt freedom. It's really financial freedom, like overall, right? So 100% agree. Yeah.
And debt just isn't shameful. Like I understand, I have felt that way too, and I'm not trying to minimize anybody that feels that way. But when you really interrogate that idea, that even credit card debt, like how is that shameful in a society that is pushing us so much to have like the next big thing, and that it's okay to be in credit card debt? Like it's not a personal failure at all to be in any kind
of
debt.
We're gonna blame capitalism. No, honestly, because you're right though. There really should be no shame or guilt around all debt. Honestly, I just feel like there really shouldn't be. I'm 100% with you, because I mean, we've all made our decisions and we decided to do what we did, but a lot of the things that we did is because we weren't educated enough, or we're going to get this education that we need in order to like level up, right? So yeah, no, I'm with you. So 100%.
And not only should it just not be shameful, because it just genuinely we're doing the best with the information that we have in almost all cases, but that shame is not serving you.
Right.
Like if that shame is serving you to just sprint your way out of debt without looking at a balanced, holistic visual of your finances, like actually that shame is taking money away from you, and it's making you feel worse. It'll probably make you trip up more and like give up more when you do make small understandable mistakes.
Exactly.
So not only is it just wrong, but also like it's not getting you anywhere in a lot of cases. I mean, maybe, but it's like, then when you get out of debt, guess what? The shame doesn't just go away.
It doesn't.
Like,
yeah, you do have to address that, right? You really do have to address that for sure. Yep, I agree.
And do you have any tips for somebody who's trying to find that balance between paying off that debt and investing? Like how do you kind of think of that decision?
Yeah, so for sure. So like I mentioned, I think for anyone, if you have high interest debt, right, credit card debt, you should definitely focus on paying that off, right? But I think you should still be investing in your employer sponsored retirement plan up to the match, right? Up to the match until you're credit card debt free, because that credit card, I mean, it's probably charging you 18, 25. I don't even know. Like, it's so predatory, right? And it's much more beneficial if you do the math, probably to pay off your credit card debt first. Then once you're credit card debt free, it depends, right? It just depends on what you want to do. Like, if you are like sprinting to debt freedom, and again, no shame or like shade to anyone that's doing that, then go ahead and attack your debt, do that, right? But if you want to now maybe start contributing to a Roth IRA if you're eligible, that could also benefit you, right? That's $6,000 a year, so $500 a month that you're setting aside, if you can, towards your Roth IRA, because that's another very beneficial retirement plan that you could contribute to. So that's really what I am doing now. I want to max out my Roth IRA for this year, even though I'm still paying off debt, because I just feel like the interest rate on my student loans is pretty low. It's like 3%. And I think it would be beneficial to me to do both, right? So again, it depends on what you're comfortable with. I mean, I think everyone should be at least doing the, employee sponsored retirement plan, then their Roth IRA perhaps. Then you can look into like other forms of investing. Maybe if you have an HSA, or go back and max out that, employee sponsored retirement plan. But again, for teachers, that's probably not very feasible. We probably can't max out all of those retirement accounts, especially if you're a single person, because you need to live. Because you need to provide for yourself. And I mean, honestly, like if you are like a dual income household and like one of you is a teacher, there is so many, like, honestly, teachers have some cool retirement accounts, honestly. Like at in my district, we have our pension, which we have to contribute to. We have a 403b. We also have a 457b. So you could max out both of those, which are like $19,500, $38,000 a year. Plus, if you had an HSA, like it really could be like, you could be going crazy with investing, with the pre-tax investing. But again, like I said, we don't really make enough money for us to really just max out those retirement accounts unless you have like a side hustle or, some income on the side. So just look into what your district has for you, right? So just see what they have.
Yeah, I recently had a YouTube commenter be like, I can't wait until the day where I can max out my 403b and my 457. And I was like,
yeah,
slow down.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I don't have $38K out of my salary.
No, I'm like doing the math. I'm like, that's like 20,000 left. Then there's taxes. Like, I'm not gonna be able to live. I'm like, we're gonna be eating, oatmeal and ramen every day. That's pretty much, no, I can't. I'm trying to live my life.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, maybe eventually when we're on that top of the salary scale, but I don't, or maybe if I finally find a sugar daddy, we can make it happen. But
seriously.
So let's talk about living in a high cost of living area, which I know that you live in, because we live in pretty much the same area, right? I'm in DC, you're in Virginia, right across the bridge, in Northern Virginia. And my question is, what is your perspective on choosing to live in a high cost of living area? As somebody who's financially focused, what are the benefits of that and the drawbacks?
Well, the benefits are that you're going to be paid higher, right? As a teacher. Currently, I think I make $62,500. This is my third year teaching with a master's. So I know I don't know who's listening, where they're listening from, but they're probably like, what?
Yeah.
But like, honestly, also the cost of living is higher, like you said, right? So I think the benefit is the income is higher, But then the drawbacks are there's so much more to do. Everything is expensive. And you're trying to be on this journey and you're like, okay, like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to turn down? I can't, obviously, I'm not doing everything, right? Am I going to happy hour every week? I'm not, going out to eat every week, but I still do those things in moderation, right? So, I mean, I think it's very beneficial for me also because I don't live by myself. I think if I was a single person trying to live on my own in like a 1-bedroom apartment, I would probably be struggling a lot more. You know what I mean? The other thing is there is no way as a single person that I would be able to live in like the district that I live in. I teach in probably the richest county in Virginia, probably one of the richest counties in the United States. I'm not even gonna, so I get paid according to that, but like there's no way I could probably live there, right? So now my commute is a little bit longer as well. So, I mean, there are definitely benefits and there are drawbacks, but I mean, I wouldn't probably live anywhere else. Just, I'm also from this area. So, I mean, I love this area, right? But I don't know if I could ever see myself moving anywhere else and then having to like take a pay cut because I already am used to, this salary that I have, right? But again, it comes with a higher expenses. So, I mean, there are expenses that I can't control, like, my rent, but then I can make sure that maybe I'm not spending as much money on food or, entertainment or whatever the case may be. So it's a balance, right? I mean, you have to cut back in areas that you can control versus like areas that you can't, like rent, for example.
Yeah. And I feel like you just gave some tips, but I was just wondering, do you have any like specific other tips for teachers living in high cost of living areas and trying to maintain their budget and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I would say get a roommate. That's like the number one thing. Honestly, I feel like people like are always like, when you first graduate from school, you're like, oh, I have this like big job and I'm going to live on my own. I just think there is nothing wrong with living with somebody else. If you get along with that person, I think it's very beneficial to live with a roommate. I would say don't try to do too much too soon, right? Like you've just now maybe gotten your first teaching job or you've just graduated from college or whatever the case may be. The other thing I would say is don't try to keep up with other people. I mean, you are going to be with some teachers that are, I mean, I have some teachers in my building that I'm just like, I don't know how you live. I'm trying not to judge or like whatever, but like they're telling me like all these things that they're doing and, traveling over here, going out all the time and stuff like that. And I'm just like, huh? But yeah, I'm like, do we get the same paycheck? I don't know, So yeah, so I would say like, don't like try to keep up with but that's for anyone, honestly. Don't try to keep up with other people that you see living a certain lifestyle. Just try to stay focused on your, what you are doing. Pack your lunch. I mean, as a teacher, I feel like you have to pack your lunch anyway. You literally have like 20 minutes to eat. So you can't really go anywhere. So yeah, I mean, those are just some things I would say for sure. Try to live as close as possible to where you work, but I know it's probably going to be difficult. But if you get a roommate, then you probably can live closer, right? So we both have very long commutes, and that's also sometimes detrimental to gas and your car and, your time. So
yeah, that is all very true. So you also, in addition to just having your platform, Melannial Money, and your website and Instagram, you offer some services. You have a couple of products.
Yeah.
But I'm most interested in talking about your coaching program today. Who is a good fit for coaching with you? Like, are teachers in general a good fit? Like, what do you do with them through your coaching program? Just to give them a sense in case anybody wants to contact you.
So coaching, I mean, teachers definitely really, I think the perfect person for my coaching services is someone that's in debt, that's trying to get out of debt, and it's just like, where do I start? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't have a budget. Maybe they do have a budget, but it's not working for them. They know they're in debt, but they don't know where to start on how to pay off their debt. They want to invest, but they don't know how to balance investing with paying off debt. I would say that's like the perfect client, right? I mean, come to me because I can help you with all of those things, right? Teachers, millennials, first-gen wealth builders, people of color, I mean, really women, I mean, men too, if you want to, but I mean, I have experience that it's usually just women or women with like partners, you know what I mean? So yeah, so I mean, any of those things I can definitely, help you with because I feel like that's really just what I've been doing over the past 2 years. And, I teach my kids the same thing. So, come to hit me up.
Yeah, I love it. And where can teachers find more from you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Melannial Money, Mellannial Money, millennialmoney.com. I'm also on Twitter sometimes, not really, but that's pretty much it. Instagram and my website. I don't really do anything else. I have a Facebook page because I guess they told me I was supposed to, but come to my YouTube, because by the time this episode has aired, I'm going to be a YouTuber, because I made a YouTube and my goal is to post 2 videos this month, and I'm going to do it. And if you hear this episode and my YouTube is not up, like, you should harass me in my DMs, because just accountability, that's what we're here for. Accountability is key.
I will be holding you accountable, because I just got so excited.
Yeah, I know, I saw you. You were like, if you don't follow Rachel on YouTube or watch her YouTube, you need to go watch her. Teachers Talk Money.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put all of the links to all of this stuff in the show notes so that everybody can find you. Thank you so much for the wealth of information and the personal experience you brought to the episode today. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Meriam.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hey, listeners, it's Christy here. I wanted to just jump in and do a little recap of all of the amazingness that Meriam and Rachel just covered. And Meriam, thank you so much, first of all, for joining us. And listeners, please, hopefully you can follow her on Melannial Money on Instagram. And it sounds like she has a YouTube channel happening soon, and get in touch with her if you're interested in some coaching. So one of the first points Meriam made is that, she comes from a culture where it's normal and kind of expected to show your money in a certain way. And I think that's something that we're all given, and that varies from our families and our cultures that we're from. And I loved that Meriam was not afraid to take the parts of that worked for her and reject the parts that didn't. Because I think that's something we all kind of have to reckon with at some point or another, is our cultural or societal or familial expectations on what we do with our lives. And that often impacts our money. And so I just really appreciated Meriam's take on, she's like, I'm not going to have a giant wedding. It's not something that's important to me, even though that's something that may be expected of her. And then I loved that she is on the front lines of teaching personal finance to her students. And nowadays, there are so many incredible resources that are out there. And that's how I've learned. That's how Rachel's learned. And then because there is so much access, there are also resources that are not great, some TikTok channels that are not giving good advice. And I love that she can jump in there and catch her students and say, hey, wait, there's a few things you need to know, that with these simple understandings, you can really build wealth for yourself, and keeping them from falling into that trap of thinking that the stock market is just about buying and selling individual stocks and getting rich quick, that there's a long game. And I love that she's there to teach that to her students in high school, because holy cow, I wish I had had that information. And it just reminds us that we need to be teaching our children that, and teaching our students that, and teaching our family members, so that they get pointed towards those resources that are going to really sustain us for wealth building across our lives. And also that she's teaching them to avoid debt, because debt is so normalized. And she's like, wait, there's lots of ways you can have less debt or eliminate debt going into college, which I thought was very cool. And then I love that she said budgeting is a tool for building long-term financial habits. That was just so beautiful. I was like, yes, Meriam, way to sum it up. And then she talked a lot about her debt payoff strategies. And if you were kind of like, what's the avalanche, snowball, what is all this methods? Rachel and I covered that in episode 9 in detail. And Meriam actually uses balanced transfers, which is referred to as the lasso method. So if you're wondering how all of that works, head back to episode 9 and be sure to catch that. And then finally, I loved the fact that Meriam totally knows her pension. She knew exactly how much of her paycheck was going towards her pension. And then she also talked a lot about her employer match for her 403B or 457 plans. So that is something that is so key. If your district offers matching funds for those optional retirement plans, that is something you do not want to leave on the table. I know for me, my district actually puts in a little more to my pension than I do, but they do not offer any matching funds on those optional retirement plans of a 403B or 457. So it really just brought me back to how important it is to know your options. And if your district is going to give you money and match funds, that is something that you probably don't want to leave on the table, no matter how much debt you have. Of course, there's going to be variables like the interest rate being super high and things like that, but you can't go back and retroactively get that match. So if you miss that time, you can't get it back. And I love that she was able to bring that perspective, because that's something that Rachel and I don't have access to. So, Rachel and Meriam, it was so great to hear your conversation. And listeners, we're so glad you're with us, and we can't wait to be back in your earbuds soon. Thanks so much for joining us here on Teachers Talk Money.
Subscribe now to make sure you don't miss a future episode.
Leave us a review of this podcast. It helps more teachers find us.
Share it with a teacher friend who can use some of this information.
You can find more money advice from Christy at Financially Fit Teacher on Instagram and Rachel at Teachers Talk Money on Instagram and YouTube.
All opinions are our own, and our awesome theme music is by John Bartman.